Alright, so what I wanted to talk about today is how dark do we get to go in a light environment? And the honest truth is, what we have to do always, so this is why I sometimes say, okay, stay away from contrast, away from lights and darks, but if you have to go dark, you have to start dark. If the image itself, if the painting, if the object itself is a dark colored object, if it's a dark blue, a dark navy, grayscale, we have to start dark. We have to make the base tone much darker. But your midtone here is a pretty light midtone. How did this open light environment drop all the way down there in a shadow? How did this cast shadow, which is on top of a light surface, get this dark? How did it get to be darker than an area that is looking away from the light source completely? So when we're doing form studies, what we do is we use a percentage, like we use a percentage of the midtone on top of the shadow to correct it anyways. But what I'm going to do is this shadow here should be much lighter. All of these shadows should be much lighter. And what I'm going to do is just get soft brush on the full 100% midtone and then bring it down to like 50. I'm going to put it on lighten. And that's how dark, maybe even less dark, this should be, because the midtone and the highlight are telling us a story. They're saying this object is actually really lightly colored. It's in an open environment. It's in an open room. Look at the background color. Okay, so this is the problem here. We sometimes go darker than we should, and what that does is it throws off the local color that represents the pigment of the object. Damn it, my bracelet's making noise. So, let me just take it off real quick. Come on. Okay. What's next? What's next would be the highlights. Some of these highlights are a little bit too close to the midtone. So what we need to see is a bit more of a spike upward. Slight spike upward. We're not looking for something that's really light, just to represent the fact that this area is a little bit more exposed. It might be the reason why this looks a little off to me. It might be because there's these super blurry edges here, and they should be a little darker. That might be the reason why I desired more contrast. Remember that contrast, you always go for the edges before you consider contrast. So this area here, equally exposed to the light source, a little bit less. So we take this, shave off a great deal of it, and we apply it here. I want this to be a consistent thing between the edges. This line, the trajectory of the line that comes right out of this surface, moves upward in the same angle as this does. So why is this one darker? Especially if it's in between two light values. This one is bouncing a lot of light back on top. So again, what we do is we raise this up by a percentage. It's a lot of it is mathematics, and we just have to give it some time before it feels right. This surface, and this surface all look in the same direction. And as long as you're going back and forth and realizing that the value you started with isn't necessarily going to be the value you end with, as long as you're ready for that kind of change, then you'll have more accurate values across the map. Alright, so let's take a look at them before. Way too dark. Too much contrast considering how light the background was. The only way this object could have gotten this dark is if the background was a little bit darker. If this was some kind of flashlight. Right? As for the cast shadow, an object's cast shadow belongs not to the object, but to the object receiving it. So the surface area here is exposed to the light source, so it would receive the cast shadow and make it lighter. So by it belonging to the object receiving it means it inherits its values somewhat. So it doesn't get to be all this dark. The light is perfectly shining on top. This surface right here, if the light is perfectly on top, we might get a cast shadow of this surface on top of this one. So let me make it a little less. We might get this amount of light right along here. We might get a shadow that looks like that. We might. Because of the direction of the light source. This is perfectly straight and perpendicular, parallel with this line, this edge, and the edge of this cast shadow, so we might not get that. But it just depends on the kind of light source it is. I would put a small one. just because it looks nice. And that's what I mean. Sometimes it looks good and you get away with it because it looks good. Can you guys see the screen? Can you see it move? Everything is okay? Everything is A-okay? I'm not just talking with the wrong screen showing, am I? Hey, Istebrak, do you have any brush packs available to download? Yes, I do. I have a lot of brush packs available. I'm going to be releasing some more soon. But I do have, not for the smudge tool. The smudge tool I'll release it very soon, but I do have it for the ones that I'm using right now. Okay, so on my website you'll find them. Okay, so someone said form studies are difficult. They are. But really, when you take on this kind of form study, it won't be so difficult interpreting all of these values back into a full poly face, meaning that you'll know what kind of value belongs in the cheekbone in this kind of lighting and on the chin in this kind of lighting. So it is difficult now, but would you rather it be difficult the next time you draw a portrait, or would you rather it be difficult in a closed, safe lab environment of a form study? Everyone should do form studies, okay? They should be constantly in the backdrop of your studying. And everyone should do some kind of gesture line studies, or all the basic background stuff. Like all the stuff that isn't fun, you should be doing a lot of that. You should be doing less of the stuff that is fun, like designing a character. A lot of people will disagree with me and say, hey, make it fun, do you, it's all about you, you snowflake, you know, just have fun. No, if you want to get better, yeah, you're going to have to do some work. You're going to have to do the real climb, the real grit, the real time investment, the downtime, I refer to it as the downtime. When you graduate into a more mature understanding of forms and form and lighting, you can have as much fun as you want, but you won't make as many mistakes, which is much better. For me, my writing, my characters, the things I write, I want to be at my best possible version of myself when I bring those to life. And I won't be if I'm not doing this backdrop work, this work in the background. And form studies are a big part of it. For this person, you have some great radial shades right here. You still have lots of trouble with your cast shadows, so try your best to lighten them up just a little bit. Not sure why my brush is doing this. Yes, save. Okay. No. I think I lost my pen pressure. Just getting my Photoshop back up. I did reset my services, so that might be the reason why. Okay, so I lighten that up, and just along the hottest point of the sphere, that shadow also lightens up right here, because this has more reflection back. And because it lightens up, the cast shadow can either be darker, sharper, or brighter. It really just depends on how reflective, how much bloom and bounce back off the surface we get. This feels very mattified, so it might just be just this amount of blurriness to it. Sorry, I don't know how to talk right now. Not too sharp, not too blurred. Okay. So those are the changes I'd make to that. For this one, what you never want to do is draw the light source in the painting. Just, you'll know it's there. You'll know it's coming out of this. The reason why you don't want to put the light source there is because it's a no man's land value, and it gets to be pure white, but it's going to throw off the values in your painting. So what you want to do is address these values here without having that no man's land value white just sitting there. You can put it in an illustration if it's a floating ball or a fireplace, but you don't want to make it that light. The problem with what you just did was you gave me a tiny, it's not a universal light source. Damn it, my table is making such noises. Shut up. Okay. What's making that horrid noise? I put like tissue in between the glass and the support, which is, okay, anyway. So what you did was you gave me a bright light source. One tiny little light source, small enough to fit in the canvas, not universal, but you kept the background lighter. That's not possible. What we want to do is, if in order for it to have, okay, let's say we were in daytime and we made a fireplace. Would the fireplace's cast shadows undo the cast shadows cast by the sun? Absolutely not. It's a smaller light source. The sun is the larger light source, so it's not going to take over and assume power over all the objects in the canvas. What we got to do is get rid of that and think about the fact that you chose a light source, light environment that had the background bright enough. The background is the giveaway. A lot of people forget about the role the background color plays. So if you wanted to keep that fireplace and you wanted to keep all this contrast, which the fireplace will cause, you're going to have to darken the background significantly. Alright, so I'm just gonna whoops. This is gonna be a pain in the butt. Let me see if I can. Oops. Oh my god, I used the wrong Okay, that's good. This is not good. Oops. Okay, so we're gonna darken the background back down, and you can see how this feels like it really makes sense just a little bit. I'm gonna make them a little bit lighter than the cast shadows. But just take a look at that. Then we bring the light source back in. Okay, let's just say it's a tiny little fire. This makes a little bit more sense. This means that this surface here has to have some more light. This surface here can have this light. It can be this intense contrast because the light source is so close and so hot, and like the I don't know, frequency of the light source is really, really high and spiky, and therefore the contrast is. It's not actual frequency, but just as an example, you got higher spikes of brightness out of nowhere, out of a tiny little pin light that affects only the most close objects. A fireplace isn't going to light up the half of the hemisphere. I mean, the hemisphere of the world. So what else? What you're doing here is you're giving a gradient. You're making a gradient happen on the surfaces. The surfaces are flat. That's the point of doing form studies, is that they're flat surfaces. What does that mean? That means that they are perfect, all facing the same direction. The only way that these surfaces get gradients on them is if they tilt slightly. If they tilt slightly away, that means that they get the gradient. So by tilting, I mean like sliding gently or what's the term? Curving away from the light source. Okay, so you have these gradients here. These gradients do not belong here. It's just a flat value. This, however, this shape right here is looking away from this side is looking away from the light source. It's not even facing the light source. This one kind of, if it was right here. But this one is actually looking away. We're actually looking at the dark side, or the eclipsed side of this surface. But then you've got these that are throwing off the story as well. You've got some universal light source reflecting the top half, which again is not possible. So either, it's facing the light source or not. The half that we don't see, the other side of this, that's what's getting the light. This one is further down, and this one, the light source is right there. This section right here, if the light source was perfectly in between them all like a fireplace, this surface is also too bright. Okay, so that's one problem, and then we've got this one, which is perfectly facing the fireplace. It needs to have one solid value, period. That's it. Your radial shading is a little bit troubled, so the key to radial shading is if you have, let me overlap yours. If you have you choose the blank value, just the basic base tone, and you address where your light source is coming from. If the light source is behind this sphere, and we're looking at the dark half, you build radially towards yourself in the dark value. This is on the dark side. Okay, so we don't get to see the highest point built up. We see a more radial value in the dark sides built up. Just like this. Okay, if the light source was facing that direction, you just got to make sure all of these values radiate. Typically, you should do it all in one go, but sometimes you have difficult angles on the sphere that you have to be careful with, and you have to redo and paint over until you get the perfect grain that represents the contour lines on the surface of the sphere. But if it was facing toward us, which you should do, all of these are going to represent values that are in a portrait eventually, hopefully. You want to put values down that you can actually build up on, instead of working with really difficult light source situations that don't really work as a good opportunity to learn. What you want to always do is look at the light that's lit up. Look at the side that's lit up. If you look at the side that's lit up, you aim it at the camera so that the light side is always facing you, then you have the opportunity to show off how you're building values, how you're learning your fundamentals. Okay, so if you're always drawing with the camera eclipsed or something like that, you're not actually studying for practical use. Any portrait you paint, the camera will be pointed at, or any like design or anything like that. Illustration wise, you can have a whole face hidden in shadow, but those are specific lighting situations that you want to study on, that you want to get experience with, that you want to pick up a reference for and study specifically. But as far as you're concerned, you should be doing form studies with the light source coming from the top right at a 90-degree angle. These values here, even though I darken the background, they're still too dark. This is facing away at a similar angle than this, and this is getting some reflection back. This surface right here would cast a shadow on this surface, just like that. Unrelated question. Is there info about 14-day challenge in the Google Plus community and I just couldn't find it? Or do you start drawing faces and do it for 14 days? I do plan on making a video explaining from start to finish what a 14-day challenge is. I am going to be collecting examples of everyone's 14-day challenge, so if you have a 14-day challenge currently posted on the community, I'm going to be grabbing that for the video. I'm going to be explaining all the ins and outs of the 14-day challenge. It's become so unbelievably popular. I have to give it its own little category for the community, because the submissions are daily. Between like 25, 30, 40 people are probably on a 14-day challenge right now. From my estimate, I'm not sure, must be less. But yeah, I'll be covering fully what the 14-day challenge is all about. I might do it via critique hour, so we look at 14-day challengers, we read into their mistakes and talk about things that you should look out for, or I might do it as a separate tutorial video. But I will be doing a lot more to just make sure that the confusion out there with regards to the 14-day challenge is a little bit more cleared up. But if you do want an instruction on how to do the 14-day challenge right now, on my website, istebrak.com, you just have to go to the community tab and scroll down. The Q&A is there for the 14-day challenge, the FAQ. Okay, so what was I saying with this one? The light source should always be top down, and yeah, I think that's it. I hope I wasn't on like some really like important thought and I just didn't finish or something. Alright then, so I'm just going to bring this value down. That's for the cast shadow, and this is if the light source is coming up. And you see how the cast shadow isn't much lighter, isn't much darker than the floor beneath. So remember, the floor is also one big cube. And this is the best way to do your cast shadows. Carefully and lightly and according to the surface receiving it. Okay, so by the way, if I'm still giving out free brushes, if you wanted a copy of my brushes and you're making some good notes, all you have to do is post your notes to the class notes tab, and if I deem your notes excellent, I will reward you in the small way that I can. I don't have many gifts to give out, but if you are interested in my brushes, I do give them out for free for those who do the work. They do. According to Chandler. Alright, so I'm going to save that. Let's talk about figures, something we never talk about, gesture lines and figures. And the reason why I don't talk about it as much is because not a lot of people get into it and post their figures on the on the critique wall. But let's clear up some basic rules. Let's talk about this again. See what we have to cover in order to You know, start speaking on this in a universal language. Start talking about figures in a universal language with regards to our community. Just like we talk about form and portraiture and the 14-day challenge. So let's bring in some dialogue about figures. All right. Last time I talked about it. When we study figures, you look at the motion of figures. You look at videos. This will always be my recommendation. Try to get someone, a model, someone you know, your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, to pose for you, and see how their bodies move around if you can't find a decent video showing the movement. But a video is important because of the before and after frames that come in the greater animation of the gesture. It helps you appreciate where the joints, the movement, the fact that this is not just a still statue, this is an object that once moved and the camera took a still photo of it. So that out of the way, let's talk about technique and application. You've got level 1, 2, 3, 4, you got so many different versions. I don't know if these are stages or versions. I really don't know, but you should only have 3 stages in your figure drawing. 3 stages only. What the final drawing looked like, my figure drawing, what it finally looked like, and what the rough sketches looked like. If you look at the rough sketches, they're unbelievably messy. They're all over the place. You can't even count the lines. They're uncountable. There's so many lines, innumerable, abundant lines, and that's what you want to do with your rough stages. So you've got 3 stages. Right, the first stage is your gesture lines. We've covered this before. Right, the second stage are your shapes. They should always be in 3 dimensions. Always, because the z-axis helps you eventually put shadows in the right spot. And if you know how to use the cube, because you've been doing forms and form studies, then you know how to shade a leg without reference. And then 3 is your line art stage. Your final polishing lines. These lines you count. You count these lines. You count them. You don't just use as many as you want. Between this and this is just 2 lines. If you want to pull it off in 1 line, you can pull it off. You should not have used this many lines, especially because under here I see some light lines for the rough, just the roughing out of the shapes, and I see a large gesture line right along here. That's the problem, is that we're not organized. And when we're not organized, we can't break down this much anatomy. This is a lot of anatomy to break down. This is this is the final picture. This is it. This is the end game. And you're trying to bring this back into your painting. You have to break it down into layers. Your brain can't process all of this at once in 1 layer. If you overload your brain too much, you end up with hairy lines. Hairy lines are bad. I'm not talking about the texture or the style of drawing when it comes to hairy lines when we do stuff like this. I'm talking about the hairy lines that they're not intentionally hairy, they're accidentally hairy. They're a representation of the anxiety your brain is going through trying to process and transfer all this information and the anatomy, the biology, the science, the physics, all the way back into 1 painting in 1 go, in 1 frame. Are you crazy? You can't do that. You can't pull that kind of stuff off. You can't put yourself under that kind of pressure. Your brain will not perform. What you have to do is break it down into pieces. The gesture line stage represents the fluid motion. All these joints have a fluid motion to them. They're all capable of twisting and moving the body around in so many ways, an infinite combination of positions that you have to be able to capture perfectly in your gesture if you want a professionally looking gesture. A professional looking gesture if you want to do it well. That means that you have to address the motion, the general lean, the size, the shape, the distribution of the legs, the space, the center of gravity, the symmetry, all has to be addressed in your gesture line stage. Typically, you should not need 100 gesture lines for this stage. It's just a matter of having 1 leg, an S-shaped leg, an S-shaped gesture line for the leg. So I see an S shape right here. This basically is going to tell me where to place the fat of the thigh and the calves. And then we've got 1 straight line. Typically it's CS or I for the front leg. This one is holding up all the weight, so it's straighter. The knees are locked. This one is almost bent. And then we have, I guess both of them are distributing the weight evenly, but this one is a little bit more locked. And so you to create that distinction, you show that this one is just a little bit more bent than this. And then you factor in the fact that eventually this, on your shape stage, you use a cube to represent the torso and any other unmoving object. What I usually do is combine a cube for the hips with a sphere, with a cylinder, a sphere on either side. And out of all of these units, an arrow emerges. You want to capture the fact that this half of the body is pointing in a different direction, away from the camera. That's another thing you've processed before your line art stage. That's another thing you got out of the way before your line art stage. The torso, which direction is the torso looking at? Not in the same direction as the hips. The torso is a little bit more tilted and away from the camera, just a little bit more. And so again, you factor that and you see more of one side of the cube than the other. So over here you see just a little bit of the cube. Let me get another color. And this side you see a lot of the cube, of the side of the cube. Okay, so we're seeing a lot more on this side than we are on this side. Or this one is just a little bit more tilted this way. Okay, so this is the stuff you break down between your gesture line stage and your shape stage. This is where all of this is where you get to show off all your knowledge. You don't show off your knowledge in this measly, useless stage. This stage is useless. Its only role is to look pretty. You don't address the sciences and the anatomy and all of the important business to create a believable, non-stiff gesture. It doesn't happen here. It all happens here. This is where your knowledge gets tested, right along here. This is where you decide what the tilt is, what the angles are, what the perspective is we're looking at the object, what is the camera high, is the camera low, what the age is, the size of the head compared to the body. This is where you decide on symmetry, find the symmetry line, decide on the greater motion and the attitude of the gesture. All of this happens in these first stages. So I'm seeing all these stages and I'm really not sure what I'm looking at. Hairy line, maybe these were attempts. Hairy lines, this one is probably the most successful attempt, but it's still very awkward. You still have a tilt this way. The body feels like it's falling over. This is because when we're painting a gesture line, we always do this little crosshair right here to help us establish a line of balance like a kebab stick. This is not a symmetry line. This is the basic line to make sure that if we have too much of one side, we have too much of the body on one side, the body's going to fall over. So if I make one of these, the body feels like it's going to fall over, and it's just right off the foot, right off the ball of the foot. The symmetrical position right beside the heavy toe, that's usually where our balance is decided. And if this is leaning too much, it feels like she's going to fall over. Again, another component of the first two stages of drawing a figure. Okay, so I'm not sure what these were. Your shape stages, it feels like this is your shape stage. Stop using cylinders for everything, or else you're going to draw some sort of bubbly looking Michelin man kind of mascot dude who has absolutely no muscle structure. He's just got fat pockets everywhere. And when you use shape cylinders and spheres, I use for fatty pockets like thighs and calves and arms and then the belly area and the lower chin and the neck sometimes. But cubes, you have to start, what an ugly color, Jesus, again, did this again? I used that color earlier in class. What you want to do is use a cube for forearms and shins, chest area, cubes for the chest area, cubes for the lower half, the jaw and the chin, cubes for the side of the head. So when you're doing these two, you're addressing form, anatomy, and gesture. These are massive three heavy titan pillars of the success of your painting. Gesture, which comes from animation. The anatomy, which comes from muscle groups. So gesture is animation. Anatomy and form. The fact that this is still a three-dimensional object in a three-dimensional world. Stop trying to do all of these stages at the same time. It's not going to work. Yes, a kebab stick. Istebrak, I don't agree with the symmetry balance thing. Okay, Nick. All right. Typically, though, we want to create characters that look like they're standing up. So if they're flopping over to one side, it might be a position of intense motion, and there might be in an open gesture. This is pretty closed, the gesture. It's not crazy gesture forward. She's standing still. An open gesture is part of a really massive movement, some kind of lunge forward or jump or attack, or something where one of your legs is in the air or both your legs are in the air. That's when you can get asymmetrical leaning with the center of mass all the way off, and you can just land in a really awkward way. If someone's falling, it's usually an open gesture. But when we're talking about standing gestures, you absolutely have to use this line. It helps you distribute the mass bodies, the bodies of mass across the painting more successfully. Okay, so I'm trying to cover a really large map, a large area of the map of your form, of your knowledge, sorry. So in art, we start, let's say a person started up knowing absolutely nothing about art, and their map was completely dark. There was a fog of war in games, so it's a completely dark map. You can start anywhere on the map, but eventually they all link together. In your form studies, you are preparing yourself for the day you have to apply all of these shapes into lighting. So these form studies that we looked at today, one day this is going to be a chest torso. One day this is going to be a shoulder. One day this is going to be an arm area right here. Meaning that you're going to transfer all of this knowledge back. This is why my teaching style and my students improve so fast, because we go to the root of it. We take out all of the labels, we take out all the names, and we replace them with science only, and a way to observe objects and see objects in their core geometric anatomy, meaning their geometric identity, if it's a difference between a cube and a circle. So the most important thing about gesture lines at this point, knowing that that's the end goal, is to use the right shapes in stage 2. All right, stage 2, it's all about using the right shapes. I've covered a lot of the right shapes to use, shapes that I use in my work, from that pyramid diamond shape to the nose to the forearm. I have one more little thing to recommend, and then I'll call it a night. When it comes to legs, you can have a lot of stiffness. Legs are supposed to be stiff. They keep you up. There's not much, I mean, the more flexible the leg, the more unusual the pose. Is not so natural. So if you got someone squatting or someone in a plie or someone kicking, that's not a natural pose. It's an exertion of energy. Standing or sitting down, that's more natural, and you can have a really, you can get away with a lot of stiffness for legs when they're sitting down or standing up. Arms, however, are the exact opposite. For arms, what I recommend you guys use for the rest of your studies is a spring. This is a spring I use, and why it's so useful is because in one go you have to decide on the flexibility of the arm. So in one go, okay, so this is where the shoulder is. Let's say you have the cube for the torso, and you've got the shoulder, and you've got the cylinder here for the shoulder. These are some other shapes that I use to help me figure out the body. Then you've got, don't decide on where the elbow is. Leave the elbow alone. The elbow is very flexible. This is a joint, the elbow is a joint, the wrist is a joint, and the halfway knuckles of the fingers are a joint. You've got so many ways the arm can move, it's unbelievable. You've got this, that it can move anywhere, and then once you decide where that goes, you got this, and it can move anywhere. Of course, there's limitations. And then once you decide on that, you've got this that can move anywhere, and then you've got these that can move anywhere. Now you have a really interesting looking arm that feels more flexible. But it's not like that. What we do is we decide on where the wrist is going to be. If you want to decide on where the hands are going to be. Usually the hands are playing a role, holding something, pointing to something, doing something. Once that's done, you fill in the space with the spring. Okay, why the spring is so important. Usually the forearm is a little bit shorter than the, I guess, a little bit shorter than the upper arm, because the upper arm has some of the shoulder length on it. Okay, so we do a little thing like that. The reason why we use this spring is because it makes you think and consider and answer the question where the elbow is pointing. Where is the elbow pointing to? And what role is it playing in keeping what that object, what the hand is holding upward? So if this was a sword that was on the floor, this is a pretty okay position for the elbow. But if the biceps have to be engaged, the elbow has to point down, because now we have to do the pulley system. The pulley has to pull this sword back up. If we're pulling the sword upward, or if we're holding the sword up, that means, let's say it's a club, so I can club any more people who have stupid questions for me. Okay, this is a club I'm going to use on you if you ask me any more stupid questions. Okay, so they're holding the club up. This means that this arm has to bend forward, engaging the biceps. Okay? And then, of course, completing the gesture, completing the motion of the mechanics of the face. Remember, this is the anatomy portion. There was gesture, which was considered anatomy, which we just answered. This muscle group has to engage in order to pull this club up. And the form. The form now comes into the fact that, okay, this forearm is represented with a cube, and here can be used a large cylinder on which we place some spheres to represent the muscle groups, especially if it's a built person, especially if it's a big, heavy tank character, heavy at the top, maybe not tiny legs like that, we're supposed to have like really, really developed muscles, and it makes sense that they can carry this massive object. All right, I love you too. All right. What if I draw a long sword? I can fight back. Okay, so any questions regarding anything I just covered? I expect a couple of questions when it comes to gestures. It's not something we cover thoroughly, and I believe that it's one of those instances where mileage really does count, how long you spent looking at bodies, observing body forms, muscle groups, and what the roles they play in certain gestures. I used to give a tip: whenever you don't know which muscle group to accent when it comes to a gesture, do the gesture yourself. Do a squat, do the jump, see what happens to you. You know, what happens to your clothes? They go all over the place. Your hair responds to that exertion of energy, and it goes all over the place. It's the last thing to follow once you hit the floor again. Which muscle groups hurt the most? Which ones do you feel the pressure the most? Those are the ones that are engaging. What's happening to your elbow? Where's your elbow looking at? And always, always consider the directions of what directions the body parts are facing, so you know how much of one side of the cube is visible over another. So it's a lot of discussion on this matter. And a great deal of stuff to consider when you're just working with one layer of application. You need to have 3 layers. You need to have one layer that answers the gesture question, elbows and direction and all. Then you have, on top of deciding all of that, you have these shapes you have to decide on. These shapes help guide your knowledge of anatomy, help guide you towards finding landmarks. The breasts are landmarks, elbows are landmarks, shoulders are landmarks, and feet are landmarks. Knees are landmarks. Major joints or different mass bodies are landmarks across the face, across the body. That means that once you locate them on your gesture lines, you can pretty much start measuring head length towards the feet, which should be 8 long. Once that's completed and you have a shape that represents these body parts perfectly, you lower all of that. All of that hard work has to stay behind the curtains. You lower all of that back down to like 15% visibility, and then you have your what's it called? You have your line art stage. Sorry, I blanked out. You have your line art stage. At this point, you count your lines, 1 line for one side of one thigh, and that's it. You should not be using 17 lines for one side. So here is an example. All of these are an example of the different kinds of anxieties and stressors that change our representation of our actual skill level. One massive thing that we benefit from working this organized in our gesture drawings is the fact that our skill level actually gets represented in its true level, in its true numbers. So if you're not doing any of this, your work is going to look messy, and you're going to have more anxiety, and you're going to make more mistakes. You're going to have hairier lines, less efficiency, less anatomy, and less everything. That means that the more organized you are, the closer you are to representing your actual present, current skill level. You'll all draw better than you do right now if you're not organized. If you're organized, you're actually representing your real skill level, and you're only going to get better from here. And all of these, find the symmetry lines and all the shapes. If you have to find the symmetry line for the face, don't worry about drawing the face. Here the head is too small for the body. You get away with it's kind of stylistic if you make the feet the same size as the head or something similar to it, that you kind of get away with having wonky proportions like that. But always look out for the head to help you measure how much head sizes you have. Sometimes you can have 9, sometimes you can have 7. For children, you have around 5 or 6 because the head size is so huge. You have less head size across the body. But that is a whole other study level. Studying older or younger is always different. Even in portraiture, we separate those topics. Let me answer some questions. Okay, Istebrak, for the first form study, why did you lighten the cast shadow to be lighter than the shadow the side shadow of the object? Was it because of the ambience? Why aren't the core shadows as light? The core shadows aren't as light because they're displaced. They are the actual object looking away from the camera, looking away from the light source. The cast shadows possibly might fall on a surface that's looking up at the light source. This means that the light source still has somewhat more access to that surface and its core cast shadows than the core shadow and its cast shadows. The core shadow wouldn't have cast shadows. The light isn't there anyways. That's why we lighten the surface here. Okay, this is looking up. It's just physics. This is looking up at the light source. Okay, its perpendicular line is upward. This one is looking this way. Let me get a better. Okay, the light source is coming out of this direction, and it has many humongous, far-reaching, infinite amount of rays. Of these two, which one is more exposed to the light source? This one is coming on an angle like that. Which one is more exposed to the light source? This one. Anything on top of this one, be it a tattoo or a sticker, it's going to be lighter. Even a cast shadow. A cast shadow doesn't mean light is null and void. No, nothing means light is null and void unless the light source is turned off. Everything is a variation of the light's access to the light is accessing this, believe it or not, out of the bounce light and the ambient occlusion in the surrounding area, because of the bounce light and then the constant formulas that apply if the room was massive and white colored, or just this open room right here. All right, this belongs to this object. The cast shadow belongs to the object receiving it, not the object casting it. Just because this has a dark value to it doesn't mean this has to. And this is much closer to the bounce light bouncing off. So light doesn't just sit there and make camp and make a little fireplace and pitch a tent and just sit there once it's done. No, it bounces right back off, no rest. Just bounces right back down. Right back up, sorry. And this light source right here, this, whatever bounced onto this, it's actually a little bit lower, I understand, but I just, for the demonstration. The light source ray that hit this bounces back up. And in its bounce back up, it's also working as a minor light source, and it's illuminating this lower half. So you can lighten in a gradient this lower half of this side. But still, at the end of the day, the displacement is just in the formula. This is closer on the angles than this is. This is a much larger displacement angle-wise. Okay, so imagine it like this. Light source, and then you've got protractor, and you're just basically representing the surface area. So we've got this, and then we've got this surface, and the light source is coming from the top. This one has less of a distance to cover, so imagine it being this kind of displacement away from the light source, which is over here, compared over here compared to this one, which has a larger angle to cover. So in order for this to have been light, we have to tilt this shape all the way back up on an angle to point back at the light source. Okay, so it's just a matter of the distance required to get this on the same level as this. You guys understand? And measuring this means that you have to separate the surface you have to look at the exact area, give it an angle according to its displacement from the light source, and then tilt it, and you get all that maximum light exposure back if it's pointing directly at the light source. Let's say the light source is at 0. That's represented as 0. The brightest point in the painting is looking at the light source as 0. Let's just say let's just measure it like that. Damn it. Okay, so does that answer your question? Ambience is too high, the surface is too light. It doesn't allow that much. And if it's reflective, Antares, if it's a reflective painting, then if it's a reflective surface, then yes, we do end up having even lighter cast shadow, almost no cast shadow if it's really super reflective. Istebrak, in terms of successful studies, would you agree that many successful gesture drawings are more valuable than a handful of poorly drawn construction figures? Many gesture drawings are more valuable than a handful of poorly drawn construction figures, meaning fully sketched figures that are really badly sketched compared to many successful gestures. Are you creating the distinction between rendered and unrendered, Ryan? Sorry, Susanna. Okay. No problem, Antares. It's just because this area is more exposed, anything on top of it just gets lighter. That's the fastest way to talk about it. Yeah, you know what yeah, know when you think about where you want to be in life and it feels so far away when you die inside. I don't know what you're saying, Nick. Hi, Istebrak. I use traditional medium and it's my first time on live chat. So hi, hello. Quick question. Would you recommend watercolor pencils? Yes, I do. I love them. They're so blendable. One big quick tip that I have for you is layer as much as possible. Do not go for the full opaque color. Layer as much as possible. Sometimes the shavings of the watercolor pencil shade better than using the pencil head on. But layer, always layer. And when you layer, you have to know how dark you're layering and what you're layering towards. So layer along a radial z-axis towards the darkest point of the image. It's not like we can just paint over and fix our values according to the darkest point in the image. When you work traditionally, there's no erasing. This is very unforgiving. So you have to layer. And in order for you to layer successfully, think about the form, think about the darkest point, and start there by avoiding darkening that. And find the lightest point, avoid darkening that as much as possible. Start at the darkest point and emanate the darkness out of that, getting darker and darker and darker. Keeping your lightest gradients closer to the lightest point. Istebrak, lots of people in community are collectively suffering from three-quarter view portrait views and rotation. There isn't a lot of stuff covering that topic. I do have a couple of them. I actually critique Pitch Black's three-quarter view. The more I see, I probably will do the 14-day challenge Q&A, kind of one day dedicated to just what is the 14-day challenge and answer. I have done that before, but I guess you guys really need like a thorough, quick video on it. But I might just do it as a critique hour if not. But I have covered before three-quarter view rotation. I've taught how to do the nose in three-quarter view. I've taught how to do the eyes in three-quarter view and the lips in three-quarter view all separately. But as the face as a whole, I guess I do have to do a class on where you start, what the best geometric shapes you use to represent the head. Basically a sphere and a cube, but you know, a little bit more specific than that. The best shape geometric anatomy to use for the nose, how to identify how much of the nose side we're seeing, if we're even seeing the other side of the nostril, the other side of the nose and the other nostril, how much of the eyes are rotated, how to keep the face looking the same in all three rotations, front view, side view, and three-quarter view. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into painting a three-quarter view, which means there's a lot of stuff that I have to teach, and it's hard for me to cover all of that stuff. So if you guys want to, paint some three-quarter view faces. Next class, next Tuesday, if you want to, depending on your reaction now, next Tuesday can be all about three-quarter view faces. If you guys want to, the more you do, the more I do. We're hand in hand in this community. So if you guys want to do three-quarter view faces on the 11th, just say so now. All of you have to paint something. You have to paint a three-quarter view face. Make mistakes. If you want to make mistakes, if you want to learn, make some mistakes. Do not censor your mistakes. Forget about the reference. Just draw it right there and show me what you can do, so I know where to start and what to teach you. Okay? So if you want to, she has a lot of three-quarter view videos on the CritiqueHour. Yeah, but more is always welcome. Istebrak, it's so frustrating. What's frustrating? What is the best way to make faces symmetrical? In traditional, I make symmetry line, but everything, but it always turns out messed up. It's probably because you don't know how to seam the geometric anatomy back in towards of the nose and the eyes and the mouth back on top of the symmetry line, and how the symmetry line, Nick, as you carve away at the face, you end up having a lower symmetry line. So it's just because you don't know where to place it right now that it's causing you a little bit of trouble. But keep it in there. Don't give up on it. Keep it in there in your drawing process. Hi, Mohammed. How are you? Welcome. Ahlan. I mean, as far as what a beginner should put their focus on, first striving to achieve successful gesture lines in the drawings over the perfect construction figure. In my opinion, Ryan, the best possible, like for me, I would rather see really, really happy, healthy looking gesture lines and shapes than seeing the final touch-up lines. I would be very happy seeing those. Those just give me so much inspiration to start painting. They're my favorite part of a painting. I hate the line art stage because at that point it's just, you have to represent everything with that line and you have to keep counting, and I'm fighting myself and my anxiety to use more lines, and I know it looks good to have a very low amount of lines, and I just want to constantly have that low amount. Let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. I'm not sure if, well, something like this. I kind of don't even like my recent stuff. I hate showing my art in my videos. Everyone asks me to do it. All other artists on YouTube do it. But I absolutely hate showing my lines. Oh, they're so shitty. I'm not very proud of them right now. Amazonian lineup. If I can just show you. Well, this was for Patreon. If I can just show you the crappy lines that I had underneath. Do you see that? So I skip gestures and I skip some of the cues because I see them. I've done them for so long, I see them. I'm at a point where I don't need them. But for students who are still working, you want to distribute weight properly, you want to capture the nature of the gesture. This is what my lines look like. And I have the most fun here because I really get to mess around. And then once you lower that all the way back down to nothing, and then you can bring these in, and these help you figure out where all the lines go. I have one line for every major unit of anatomy. I don't have more than one, and that's something that I strive for. I'm seeing so many mistakes right now because I haven't looked at this in about a week or 2 weeks or something, but that's pretty much what I'm talking about. If you have great gesture lines, if you have great shapes, to me that means so much more because that's where all the work goes than the final design. Yeah, it's very, very tempting to go straight into your line art, to say, hey, it looks shitty now, I'll fix it in the line art. No, never say that. The line art will fail. You can't have tiles on a house and really great tile job and a great shingles and awesome brick veneer backsplashes and hardwood flooring if you don't have a decent concrete foundation. Same exact thing applies. This is the structure of the figure. I appreciate it and put more weight into it than the line art. Where do you place the kebab line? You place it anywhere. You place it first. Place that kebab line first, and the line of balance. Let's call it the line of balance so we can be respected a little bit more. But yeah, place the line of balance first, and then no, fuck it. Let's call it a kebab line. And then then just decide where the first gesture goes. Just make sure it looks like it's standing. I personally sometimes skip the line of balance, and I end up having to tilt the figure. I go to V tool and I end up tilting it back. The transform tool, I just end up tilting it back right along the line that I see because it looks like she's falling over. And one last little tip: always, 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 always flip your canvas. Please do not skip this level. There are so many. You are much more susceptible to symmetry mistakes in a body than you are in a face. Face is easy to fix. Get some fucking liquefy and fix it up. But when it comes to the body, you can't just get a liquefy and place the arm in a different position. You have to redraw the arm. So get rid of those flip mistakes, the mistakes that you don't see in your tunnel vision. Get rid of them as soon as possible before the line art stage. Get rid of them. So you guys said that you will do the 3/4 view, yeah? Sorry, I'm just going to drink some water. I just made a sound, I'm so sorry. Okay. Yes, brick veneer. I want that in my house one day. So I just bash my head against the wall until I'm an artistic genius, right? After only listening to one of your lessons, I've greatly improved in my artwork, and I want to thank you for all that you provide in these videos. You're very welcome, Kath. Would you mind answering the question from last post? What did you mean by light has a texture? Oh, well, as you saw in the last video, it's very difficult for me to explain that without it sounding abstract. My voice is gone. I'm so sorry. So light, in the fact that light has a texture, light has a fuzz to it, and when you paint the fuzz with a soft brush, that's easy to understand. But about the negative space, let me explain it, see if I can figure it out. We get a full black canvas, and then we get the emanation of the light source as a white color. And let's say this is the light source itself. And let's pretend that this is one ray of light. This is the universal light source. Okay, shining on top of the earth, which is right here. All right, let's say the earth is right there, half of it is in light. Let's just pretend this is the kind of light we're looking at. Let's change this into another color. Oops, I can't do it like that. All right, let me see what I can do. Let's change this into red. What we're doing right now is transferring this negative space, this represented as the negative space. Do you see this texture? So right now what we've literally done is invert it. Let's invert it instead. So before that brushing happened, before we turned it red. Okay, merge down. Image, adjustments, invert. This, see that fuzz outward? That's the texture of the light source. Sometimes when we have cast shadows have to reflect this negative space texture. Shut up. Just like that. Okay? So that's what I mean. Sometimes we have, in the absence of the light source, we have the texture. So this is after I inverted it. It's very difficult to think about. It's very difficult to think about like this. But that's essentially what I'm talking about when I say the texture of the light source. And the way it layers and the way it emanates, it affects the surfaces and how much shadow is visible, what's happening to the shadows, and the fact that this is the equal opposite of what's happening in the light source. Okay? How do I keep cast shadows from looking like pigmentation on the skin? You're making them too dark. You keep them light, chica. That's why they look like pigmentation. They're outside of the base. So compare your shadow color to the base tone. If it's like this much of a jump, that's just pigmentation. Someone came in and got some paint and painted only around the nose shadow just to mess with you. Okay, so I think that's it. I'm trying to find some other questions. But that's it for today. Thank you everyone for joining. If you guys wanted to follow me everywhere, so the brushes and Portrait Studio, if you guys are interested in that, is all available in the store. The community is where you can go to scroll down and read all of the FAQ questions. So these have to do with the 14-day challenge as well. To join the community, just go to Google Plus and just join. Make sure you read the rules. Please read the rules. Even at 5,000 members, it's still going pretty well, and that's because the walls aren't being flooded with crazy amounts of submissions, single sketches. People aren't posting twice a day. You're limited to one post a day. No single sketch posts. Post multiple sketches at the same time. So this applies to figure drawing challengers who want to post their figure drawings. You cannot post just one gesture drawing and use up your daily post with that. You only have one post. Use it wisely. One post a day. Please make sure you work with the categories that keep everything organized and accessible. I do go to miscellaneous work for community critique for the video. If you have 14-day challenges, you can submit them to the 14-day challenge here. There's a music for drawing. Recently, by a suggestion of Tom, who actually put together an index I'm going to talk about in a second. We have a category for art books. If you have art books to share, art books to discuss, that you can buy on Amazon and stuff like that. And then finally, the glossary. I use a lot of terms. If you're new to my videos, Tom had 10 sitter 8, 10 Tom, I'm not sure what's happening here. I'm not sure how to describe it. 10 sitter 10. Tom has made us a glossary. It's a Google document. It is editable, but not open to edit by everyone, I believe. I think I have to go in there and correct if I see a couple of mistakes. But if you're confused about specific terms that I use, he has put it together here. He has put it together amazingly. Like, I cannot believe the amount of work you guys have put into it. Tom and a couple of people who have helped him answer some questions about terms that I use, what I mean when I say value sharing, what I mean when I say geometric anatomy. He's covered all of that in here. Also, an index has been generated. If you're looking for a specific word, specific topic that you want me to discuss, or you want to have defined, but you don't know which video to find it in, he has actually put together an index, I think compiling all of my videos, that you can search up the keyword and find the video that it relates to. So let me see if I can pull that up real quick. I'm not sure where it is. Let me see if I can just open Discord. I think he has it on Discord. Okay, so let me open it for you. Okay. Document, sheets, index of videos. Okay, so right here. Nope. Is that the index sheet? I think this is the explanation of the index right here. So this is available in the class notes. So you have to just look for his submission. There's the glossary, and I think he has posted the index here. I'm not exactly sure. Yes, it is. It's posted right here. A searchable index to Istebrak's videos, great for research for your notes or binge watching clips on a specific topic. So you just have to go to the class notes section where you can post today's notes for free brushes if you want to, and scroll down to this post. I might pin it. The thing is, I want to pin all of his stuff, but I can't multi-pin on the wall. I can only pin one thing. So that's why the pin for the glossary is up still. I'm just going to keep it up as long as possible until our next poll. As for the topic for the next poll, I still haven't made the poll yet. I will make it when I have time to put together a good resource pack for you guys for the next challenge. I promise it'll be out soon. I've been so crazy trying to figure out how to buy a car, and I think we're going on vacation. I'm not sure. There is a Discord. Yes, there is a humongous Discord. But we had a little bit of trouble keep weeding out people who disrespected the point behind the Discord, so I don't want to use a specific term or label them in a specific way, but some people were abusing it. So I am very, very cautious about who I give the Discord to. It is pretty much, it's become a tightly knit family, and we know each other, and we all talk every single day, and the discussion of art goes straight into the Discord right after classes are done between the Tuesday and Thursday meets. If you want to be part of the Discord and you have a history in the community, please message me on Facebook to get your invite. It's not an open invite. It has to be from me or another mod or admin. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining today. I will see you guys next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. I might go to Canada on these days from the Sunday to the Wednesday. I might not. I most likely will not. I've been so busy I can't fit in a Canada trip. But yeah, I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.